And we're back for another continuation of English history with Calcadia.
Chayada.
Doing good?
Come on,
Chayada.
it's like the fourth
Chayada.
time now.
It's never going to happen. Okay,
Think
Baz.
of cheddar
Baz is back.
cheese.
Cheddar cheese. Well, Baz is back, everyone. Baz, how you doing? Doing good?
Very good. Yes, very good. Thank you. Just got back from a holiday in Cornwall, exploring more deep England. So I feel refreshed.
Ooh, fun. Good. You went out. Time. You went and soaked in the bogs like the Druids of old.
There's no bogs there. There's bogs close by in Devon. They've just got lovely beaches and cliffs.
Hey, that's a. One thing I was about learning about English history is it's so fun to hear all these great deeds and cool facts, like the Peasants' Revolt or the English Civil War, the 100 Years' War, and also remember the Romans. It's like the bog people who can't even be taught English, but then also the priests were like, these boys English. Then the priests are like later were like, these boys are so beautiful. They need Catholicism, they need religion, and everyone has to go over there and bring Christianity. It's just such a wild. It's an island on the coast that's kind of the known word for so long. It's such a wild place.
Yeah, and then ended up controlling the known world. It's almost
it's a wild turn of events.
Yeah,
and now it's back to being an island, pretty much. Sadly, the death of the British Empire is a tragedy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't even a death; it was just a complete suicide. But I think we've got about an hour for this episode. The last one, it took us 3 hours and a bit to go from the Neolithic period to the Black Death in the 13th century. So 1 hour, we're going to scratch a couple more topics off, but we probably won't get to the death of the empire just yet.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it. So we left off with King John, the only King John, and the Peasants' Revolt. Yep. What are we going into next?
Straight into the 100 Years' War, which I'm sure you're excited about. And we've already waxed lyrically about the episodes on the Rest is History podcast about this period of time, because it's a fantastic resource for it.
It is. And anyone listening, check out that podcast series. It's very good. And oh my God, what's it called? Reginald? No, Reginald. What's Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book on this card again? He wrote a book about
oh my gosh, I was just thinking about it earlier. Is it Sir Roger or something like that?
Let me look it up.
No, not Sir. What is
Doyle book.
Sir Nigel.
Years. So Nigel, that is a fantastic book. I recommend everyone read it. So Arthur Conan Doyle swore it was going to be remembered and loved it much more than his Sherlock Holmes books that he hated.
Yeah. That tells you something.
Hilarious. I read Sherlock Holmes books and they're good. I like this one more. I think he's right. This is a better book.
Great. Well, so the thing that I would say that Sir Nigel shows the most is the best is the cultures of chivalry that were occurring in France and England at this time. Because where we left off before, this is a period of what's known as the Angevin Empire, coming out of the Plantagenet dynasty in England. So post-Norman invasion, things are very French in the English nobility for a while, until almost just like, all the English people going over to that new world in America, after a while start saying, well, no, we're American, we're not English. I think you see something very similar with the previously French nobility in England saying, well, we're not French, we rule over England, this is our land, these are our people, and have a bit of an ethnogenesis almost. And you can see this with going back to kings' names such as Edward, which were Anglo-Saxon in origin rather than French, things like John, Philip, things like that. And with this, the French are the premier people in terms of chivalry at the moment. And chivalry, as most people I think know by now, it doesn't mean holding open doors for women. It was a code of life for nobility and knights to live by. It was a code of tactics in warfare and statecraft, and personal conduct and honor. Honor was the key thing. Everything you do should be for honor. And it was also very pious as well, not to forget. It includes lots of acts of charity required as part of the noblesse obligée. It was, chivalry has a fantastic reputation. It's very well deserved, and the French were
they were the masters of it. Well, they were the masters of it until, I would say, the start of the 100 Years' War. You start kind of noticing, specifically with the French side, it's like, okay, you've been resting on your laurels and resting on your legend more so than the actual acts and deeds of the knights around. There were a few great knights, obviously. Still, I can't remember who was the guy who was like the guy. He was the guy who led the revolts, led the charges in the French side.
Now I've completely forgotten all the French names. I forgot to even look those up.
Let me look it up. I have the Wikipedia page open. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Sure.
No, the Wikipedia page is way too long and covers all the different periods of the 100 Years' War.
Well, if you want to skim it, I will just say that what I find really interesting about this time is that this, again, now fledging into completely English nobility, want their own answer to this French chivalry. They have the French have the oriflamme, which is a orange-red banner that they carry into battle, and it's viewed a lot like the Roman eagle. If someone carries the oriflamme, they are extremely highly favoured, and if anyone lost it, there would be hell to pay. It was extremely important, and this sort of sets the stage for.
It's so sad that we've lost the standards in modern militaries. I mean, I get it. There's not really much point to it nowadays because we're not busting out there in formations and stuff. We're not doing phalanx formations, but still, standards are so cool. Like, that's what I love about the Napoleon era. We'll get into way later, but he had standards for his troops, and I love that.
Yeah, and they were all Roman eagles as well. He didn't bring back the oriflamme. I don't know why, but
because he loved because he was never really French. He was, of course, again. He loved Rome more than France.
Yeah. Good point, actually. Well, so the English then, they are looking to rival the French because France has been one of the biggest power players in Europe for the longest time, thanks to Charlemagne.
Rich as all get out.
What's that?
They were rich as all get out. They had all the economic locks.
It was crazy. But I think we probably discussed at the end of the last episode that England was generating a lot of wealth through trade of wool. That's why we still have one of the densest populations of sheep in all the world to this day, and it was making us a lot of money. And so our nobility, wanting to distance themselves from their French roots and in order to challenge France in terms of power, took up King Arthur and the Arthurian legend as the political formula for how they were going to establish a culture of chivalry to beat the French, which I think that really needs to just set the sort of backdrop with King Arthur and all of his stories of bravery and good kingly conduct were guiding them in this rivalry. England really was an underdog when this 100 Years' War started, but incredibly ambitious. They weren't on France's level, but wanted to be. And fourth, they put in the effort to get there, as we will see. But question for you before we actually get into the history: how long was the 100 Years' War?
How long was it actually? Let me think. It started in like the 1330s, and it ended around like 1450s. So a little, maybe 110, 120.
Yeah, it started in 1337, ended in 1453. That's 116 years that the 100 Years' War lasted for.
And it has so many great figures. It depends on the wide span of history. We can get into the early figures, or was it the Black Knight or the Black King, or what was his name?
The Black Prince Edward. He was.
Black Prince.
What story that
was so cool.
Yeah, it really was.
I think towards the end of it, towards the end of the 100 Years' War, when we started getting Joan of Arc? It was absolutely on a different period.
Yes. Yeah, so, Joan of Arc, her appearance completely changes the tide. Yeah, it's crazy. 100 years of this battle of two titans was going to bring something incredible like that out.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating period. I can't wait to get into this. It's going to be great.
Great. So the reason it started, we've talked about like the sort of rivalry setting the stage. The casus belli, as to who actually declared war and why. There was a succession crisis, just the typical one that you see throughout all of European history. When someone wants a slice of somebody else's pie, they go to their family trees, which are all quite interconnected at the roots, and say, I deserve this more than you. And it was Edward III who led the succession challenge. He was the nephew of the previous French king, and claimed the throne through his mother, Isabella of France. But I think he might have had the actual legitimate claim there, but the French wanted to keep their guy in charge, essentially, because if the King of England were to successfully establish a succession claim in France at this time, that giant that it was, that was just going to be genuinely crazy. But it wasn't. So I think it kind of, when push came to shove, the dice were cast, and what were the English actually trying to get? There was lots of particular territories in France that they did have lots of historic roots in, including Normandy, which does make a lot of sense, as well as Anjou, Aquitaine, or Aquitaine if you prefer, the area around, what's it called? Calais, which is the key port between France and England. And the France was trying to squeeze the English economy as well, because we talked about the wool trade and the exporting. The majority of the wealth coming in from the wool trade was coming from Flanders, which is modern day Belgium, and that sort of area, which France has always had huge control over, and they were pushing their weight and trying to embargo or restrict English trade because we were getting uppity and trying to step on their toes, and that was another reason why they said, right, we're going to war them. And quite foreshadowing the future of England, I think the first battle was a naval one, and the fleet itself, being led by King Edward III, defeated the French, and they had uncontested control of the Channel. So
has the French ever had a good navy? Like, if the French ever had a good navy, period? I can't think of one. That was Napoleon's biggest problem, is he could never get trained sailors, because every time they got to ship out there and the sailors started to learn, what's that? Well, Nelson? Not Nelson. Who was that great English sailor during the time of Napoleon? Was it Nelson?
Probably Nelson. Yeah,
every time they got the ships out there, Nelson would come by and just absolutely sink their ships and steal everything.
Oh yeah, like even when Napoleon went to Egypt and the Battle of the Nile, that was Nelson just saying no and just like flicking him away like a bug. He
had such a hate boner for Napoleon. It was beautiful. That's a great period.
Yeah, I'm sure it was returned.
Yes.
So there we go. Before air superiority mattered in war, it was entirely sea superiority, and the English won it. And this is a good 200 or 300 years before the Royal Navy becomes like the beast that it did. But after that, you get a full-scale invasion of France, but not many pitched battles in the first few years. The first big battle that everyone talks about is the Battle of Crécy. Don't know if that's pronounced correctly in French, but it was again led by Edward III, and is when we see longbowmen take on knights. And this is the great story of the English Civil War, especially later at the Battle of Agincourt. It's known for the fact that the English used longbowmen, which were peasants that were I believe at this time it was law that every peasant male from the age of like 13 onwards had to spend an hour training with a longbow every Sunday after church. So
beautiful.
we knew cool. It is to think that like guns are banned now is just ridiculous. We have like one of the most amazing traditions of personal weapon keeping in the world, and started there. Edward III knew that this was going to be the advantage, with the French, with all their heavy cavalry, have to have their own advantage. The English knew we can't just like challenge them at the same thing. We've got to think laterally and think of how to counter that. And then Crécy is the first place where that occurs. And my favourite story from the Battle of Crécy is the story of King John of Bohemia, who's actually from Luxembourg, but Bohemia being a super powerful state within the Holy Roman Empire it mattered a hell of a lot. Bohemia was seriously important, and their king John, he went blind on crusade in North Europe against like the Lithuanian region, the pagans there, sort of like Nordic / Slavic, and I don't know how he lost his sight, but he was just from that point on. I assume he was a badass. He was up there crusading as a king, and loses his vision and still keeps on fighting. So he's at the Battle of Crécy, and with all these battles, I won't get into the tactics too much, apart from just Agincourt, because it's the one I know off the top of my head vaguely. So I don't know exactly how the battle unfolded, but you've got the rough outline there. And this is my favourite story, where King John of Bohemia sees that all the French are retreating after their cavalry have been smashed. And I don't remember the exact line he's attributed to saying, but basically, no, the King of Bohemia does not retreat. Tie me to my saddle so I can't fall off. And him and his retinue just charged the English lines. And the Black Prince was there, and one of my favourite painting from the 100 Years' War shows the Black Prince looking just so cool in all of his black armour and black tabard and stuff. People often forget as well that armour in this period wasn't just plain steel. It was painted normally in very bright colours, but then Edward famously had the black one. He just looked like the Grim Reaper riding across the battlefield, and he was just as competent at killing people as the Grim Reaper. And
for anyone Pixar who wants like a mental image of it, if you watch the new HBO House of the Dragon, the Daemon Targaryen's armor, it's all black. Pixar that. That's kind of the color and scheme of it.
It's also how the Germans would do it basically from that point onwards. If you look at contemporary art of the Holy Roman Empire from then on, oh, there you go, that's the painting. Yeah, so
that's a beautiful painting.
It's amazing. Yeah, the Black Prince dismounting, and that's the king there lying on top of the horses. I just love the contemplative nature. This really shows the chivalry of the time, where a king says, "I'm not retreating. I can't see anything, but point me towards the enemy." And his rival stood there contemplating his noble death and sacrifice. I just wonder what would have gone through Edward's head if that scene really did happen.
Yeah, I can't imagine. The whole. This is when people think of Chivalric Europe, this is the period they're thinking of. Is this 100 Years' War, and it's a real shame that the peak of the Chivalric battle periods, wars, are Indo-European wars and not against Mohammedans.
Well, the thing about chivalry is that you can almost say it requires some sort of like level of trust between opponents.
Yes.
If you're going to act nobly, and again, chivalry wasn't about putting yourself at a disadvantage. A key point of chivalry was knowing how to win a battle, but it was it took into account something about the fact that these people you're going to fight and kill are your brothers in Christ, first of all. Like these are good Christian men that are trying to kill you, and you're trying to kill them. That requires a lot of contemplation, and you have to be very.
It's always weird how both sides
would
bring bishops. Both sides would bring bishops to the battle. Like that's gotta be weird to be a bishop and seeing another bishop. You probably you met at the Vatican or something, and they're on opposite sides of a battle. Like, well,
that comes
kings are fighting, but that's a weird.
That comes in very important later on as well, where it does kind of just seem that the bishops of a particular country, rather than, they would be there on the side of the king and at the king's invitation, stuff like that. But towards the end of this 100 Years' War, it really was the French bishops and the English bishops were enemies, which is just weird. It's such a strange state of affairs.
Yeah, the more I read about European history and read about bishops and cardinals, I'm like, a lot of you guys shouldn't even be bishops or cardinals. You were just appointed because you were bastards of the king.
Yeah,
I think all of Aragon's bishops were basically bastards of the king.
Well,
during the time of Isabella.
Spaniards.
The Spaniards. Oh, then Queen Isabella. You can't go. I just finished the design book on Queen Isabella, so we can't go down a rabbit hole. But I have to just briefly say, Queen Isabella's Inquisition is proof he didn't need the Reformation. She fixed all the Spanish churches without the Reformation. And when the Reformation came, it didn't do any good because they're like, no, our priests are actually pretty good. We fixed it already.
Oh, awesome.
So I wanted to get that out there because I think it's a very interesting example of the Reformation being unneeded if people just follow Isabella's lead.
Yeah.
But please continue.
Sure. Okay. Right. Well, that was Cressy, which was 1346. And you'll find that the 100 Years' War is appropriately spread out because the next battle I've got of significant importance was 10 years later, 1356, and this is the Battle of Poitiers, or Poitiers. Now, the Black Prince, I want to say he was something like 17 years old at the Battle of Cressy, mentioned before. He was very young. And what's the quote that his, there's something that his dad said, the king, when I think like Edward's cavalry was basically surrounded, and someone said to the king, like, should we go in and save him? And he said, no, let the boy earn his spurs.
Yes. I remember that. That was such a great.
Edward III was a bit of a stern father by the sounds of it, but it worked.
We also have to remember the Black Prince was kind of like he was winning all the tournaments, he was winning all the carnivals, he was kicking ass, and when he had to go and not play field, he had to go. Didn't you have to do something to the French king that he didn't want to do? They did go do, but then he also won a tournament there, and I can't remember exactly the details, but he did something that kind of like humiliated the king in front of everybody.
Nice.
He was very much like not having it. He's like, I am the greatest guy alive right now. You can't stop me. I'm going to do this. And he was an example of peak jock, you know, or I guess English would call it lads. He was an absolute lad. You know, you could not stop him. He did what he wanted. Even during the Black Plague, he was still hosting tournaments and events because he wasn't gonna. He's like, no, I'm gonna keep doing this. He would listen to the COVID policies. He was you kind of get an image of this guy, and all his buddies also joined with him. You know, so it's him, and so you imagine a group of a high school rugby team or a high school football team going out in armor and kicking ass. That's kind of what kind of picture you want to have of these figures.
Yeah, and I feel like an American football quarterback is normally the best way to describe a European knight. Just imagine a quarterback that just has got the best education that money can buy, and you just, and like, of course they're absolute fucking units. Set them on a task and they'll get it done no matter what it is. It's extreme competence comes out of this sort of aristocracy, and sometimes it's less pretty than others, like we say about let the boy earn his spurs. But I think it shows a lot of trust that the king had in his own nobility and retinue. I mean, you know, the fruit of his own loins, in the effectiveness of this chivalry and just the meritocracy. Like you like to think so much that nobility isn't meritocracy. Are they just accidentally born into it? But like, you're accidentally born into a life where you've got the best physical and mental training accessible to anyone. Of course you're going to be the best. He was. And so 10 years later, the Battle of Poitiers, and I think there was a lot of going to and from England and France because the Channel was completely in England's control. It wasn't 100 years of, you know, like trench warfare, just a constant slog. It had its ups and downs, and lots of people say it should be viewed as multiple wars. For that reason,
there's the Edwardian phase, there's the Lancastrian phase, the Carolingian phase.
Potentially,
something else. Maybe
something else.
Yeah, there's so many intra-European wars.
Yeah, but from what I understand, during these ebbs and flows, while the Black Prince was alive, he basically never went back to England. So we're talking about hyper intelligent, hyper fit rugby or American football players just letting run rampant on the French countryside, just one big old lads holiday with lots of killing and looting.
Yes, and until you get to like Henry V, who was very much about his men not looting because he was trying to portray himself as the rightful king. Which we'll get into that way later. We'll get to Henry V stuff, which is maybe my second favorite English king. I love Henry V. He's great. But we'll get into that when we get to
Was it Richard the Lionheart?
It's Richard the Lionheart.
Yeah,
it's got to be Richard the Lionheart. I love the Crusaders. And there's so many great little stories by him finding a boar, jumping up the ship and wrestling the Muslims who were trying to get him when they were retreating. How he died and his cunt sister killing the boy anyway. There's so much to get
I
into.
remember you telling me about that bit. Well, so right, okay, people. So just think about the Black Prince, who we've already talked about, incredibly competent. He held off being surrounded by enemy cavalry while his dad watched. He's had 10 years to practice warfare in just like the Wild West. And then he gets put in another pitch battle, the Battle of Poitiers. This is such... it boggles many people's minds as to how the war didn't end at this battle. He captured the king, and like most of the French nobility were now in English control. And this was 1356, so there's nearly another 100 years to go in the war. And it's crazy. In the first 16 years of the 116-year war, you've captured the enemy king and all the nobles. So, yeah, for the longest time in the 100 Years' War, the English were winning, and there wasn't a whole lot the French could ever do to stop them. What I really like about the telling from the Rest is History podcast episode is a lot of the machinations that went on behind the scenes in the French court at this time, how there were still some people who were completely incompetent and just out for their own gain and backstabbing. Despite the fact that like a cataclysm was coming from across the sea and we were just sweeping them up, they were still completely arrogant, like you were saying, resting on their laurels.
That is the biggest complaint one could make about all of European history, is that whenever they're getting whether it was being the 100 Years' War when the English are sweeping across France and the French nobility isn't really doing anything, or backstabbing, the same way that you had the Ottomans sweeping across the eastern half of Europe and Africa, and they weren't doing anything. Yep. And that's the biggest problem with the Middle Ages or the European style nobility. There was no real unity, which is a tragedy.
Yeah, and you think you get it during the Crusades, but there's still lots of stories in the Crusades, especially after
so with the Lionheart. He had the Carter Crusade early because the French guy who went with him swore, "I'm gonna go back home, but I promise I won't invade your lands." And within 5 years, he was invading the lands. It's like, you dick.
And then even once they were successful over there was the Crusade States and the Kingdom of Jerusalem and stuff like that. They were all wrapped up in all sorts of infighting as well. History's never as simple as it seems, and I think we're all aware of that now, thankfully. But so the story of Black Prince, from what I can tell, sort of sadly doesn't end. It goes out with a fizzle, which is such a shame for such an incredible man. He, I think he ended up. Let me look up when he died.
I think.
Yeah, something like that. And he was in poor health for quite a long time, and probably because, like we said, just imagine being like a quarterback at peak physical strength all your life, and then getting like heinously drunk fairly often, because why wouldn't you when you win crazy battles like that? It's going to do a toll on your internal organs. And he died at 45 years old, actually, in 1376. But the thing to consider about that, 1376, that's a long time after the war started. We then jump forward in time to 1415 to get to the Battle of Agincourt. So there was a real, as you can imagine, lull after the Battle of Poitiers, when what do you do when your king and all the nobility have been captured? You can't exactly continue a full-scale war at that point. But as the next phase kicks off, when Henry V, who we've already talked about or mentioned, enters the scene, he does take it to the next level. He wants to have the French throne, quite clearly, which is, even though that was part of the casus belli at the start of the war, like I've said, everyone knew that they were just trying to reclaim lands around the coast, essentially.
There's a lot.
Henry V explains that.
When you go into Henry V's attempt to continue the 100 Years' War, because again, we call it 100 Years' War, but it was multiple different wars. And I don't know if these people at the time considered it. They didn't really consider it a long 100 Years' War. They were just kind of like, well, we have a treaty. You owe me money. You didn't pay the money. I got to go back in there and get the money now. Like the French nobility never really fully paid the price for the ransom price for the Dauphin or the king when they got him. Never really fully paid that. But when you get into Henry V going in there, you get two really interesting things. Is that one, he really did want the crown, and so his men and him didn't really torture, burn, or pillage anyone. And they were very much peaceful about it. Because these are my subjects, you will treat them with respect. Again, awesome. And two, he learned a lot about how to properly wage war after dealing with the Welsh and the Scots.
Yeah.
He learned a lot.
Yeah, there was that goes back to Edward I, known as the Hammer of the Scots, but he also hammered the Welsh just as much. I with Henry V, you kind of get look at Edward, who just like rolled over his British allies, and then what would happen if you just sent him over to France? Henry V and Agincourt. That's the answer. He's viewed as like the peak warrior king of most of English history, I think, among most people, because quite simply, Agincourt was such a mastermind of a battle.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of like a myth and legend and folk history surrounding it. Rather than just when you give someone the middle finger, everyone knows what that means, but there's one in England as well. If you hold up your index and middle finger to someone, that's an insult. It's not as bad as the middle finger, but it's the same sort of thing. And people say that originates around the time of Agincourt, because the English longbowmen were causing so much trouble to the French that if an English archer was ever captured by the French, they would cut off those fingers, the index and the middle, so they can't use a bow again. And so when they wanted to insult a French person, you stick those fingers up and say, I've still got my fingers, so I can kill you. I don't think it's true, awesome. But it's very cool. I also don't think it's true because Churchill did it all the time during the Second World War, because it was the V for victory. So I don't think you wouldn't go around sticking up your middle finger at people to signify victory. So, there we are. And not to go into the details of Agincourt, the thing about Agincourt is if you are really interested in like military tactics and history, you already know about it. So I feel like it probably would be a bit of a waste if you do want to learn more. There's so many resources available. It was an absolute masterpiece.
And if you want a more like, for lack of a better word, theatrical retelling of it, Shakespeare. You can read the we all know the quote: "We happy few, we happy few, we band of brothers." I mean, it's so. I went to ChatGPT and asked for all the great Shakespeare lines from Henry V, and there are some bangers in here.
It's absolutely amazing, and I think I probably mentioned this during, I think it was the English Civil War thing we watched, but it could have been the last podcast we did. I think the best adaptation of Shakespeare to film ever made is the Henry V film from, I think it's 1940, and a lot of people have seen The King on Netflix in 2019. That's a good film. It is it's loosely based on the Henry V Shakespearean play, but also its own sort of like version of retelling of this period of the 100 Years' War. But I always say, like, if you like The King, please, please, please go watch Henry V from 1940. It's got all of the original Shakespearean dialogue, so you can get a bit lost sometimes. But it's nice. It's designed to look like a play set. So the backgrounds are like almost quite obviously just, like painted boards like you would get on a West End play or a play at the Globe Theatre or something like that. But it looks phenomenal. It looks so fantasy but grounded at the same time. And I always compare that movie to The King 2019 because, like I've said, the armor of knights in this time was not just plain steel, it was painted. But The King, everything is drab, everything is brown, everything is grey, beige, undecorated, and when you see the French and the English knights fighting in the field, but how the hell are you going to know who's on your side if you're both just wearing monolithic slabs of steel? But Henry V gets it so right. It's beautiful.
I'm looking at the trailer now. It is bright.
Oh mate, yeah, it's so colourful, and I think it just shows the difference of when we were making films about our own history, when we actually respected it. Even though the king it's not derogatory towards our history. It doesn't make Europeans or English or anybody look bad. You can just see it. You can just see that we live in a culture that doesn't respect that time period at all. But while we were in the middle of a war with Germany and we had to find our inspiration to fight, and we look back to our great warrior kings and our great cultures of before, they portrayed it actually really accurately. I love the scene where he says the "we few, we happy few, we band of brothers." That's from the speech about St. Crispin's Day. And that scene in the film, you can see all of the banners that we were just talking about. There's one which has got the diagram of the Holy Trinity. What else? I can't remember what else is there. That's the one that always sticks in my mind. But yeah, it's amazing. The set pieces are absolutely beautiful, and
it does look insane.
It's such a good play. Well, it's a good film because it is a proper adaptation of Shakespeare's play and historically accurate.
If anyone listening wants to go and watch it, it is included with Amazon Prime Video. So if you have Amazon Prime Video, it's included. So I recommend everyone. I'm adding it to my watch list now, so I can watch it later. That looks the trailer just shows all the people on all the cavalry swords and the horses. That is incredible.
And of course, it's before all CGI, so you get like the big French cavalry charge, and there's it's like a 2-minute long sweeping shot of the cavalry just going flat out across the hills. It's so good.
So I say real quick. I love seeing people. I love seeing horses in movies in battle scenes because a horse doesn't know it's a movie.
yeah, true.
The great example that in Lord of the Rings and Return of the King, when Aragorn is making his big final speech and the gates of Mount Doom, and that horse rears up at the end. That was not planned. The horse just reared up out of nowhere. The horse doesn't know what's happened, but it's like, my king's making a speech. Genetic blood memory. I rear up now.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. Why wouldn't it?
Incredible. See, again, another proof Lord of the Rings only exists because of divine providence. There's no other way to account for how even the accidents, like Aragorn deflecting the knife, the guy Viggo Mortensen deflecting the knife the guy threw. It's clearly like that movie has divine providence all over it.
Wait, was that not meant to happen when he deflects the knife?
Yeah, no, when he deflects the knife, it slipped out of the guy's hand and he actually threw the knife directly at his face. And he actually deflected it. Yeah. Dude, there's so many things in that film. Like, that should have killed him, or at least broke his nose. And that horse shouldn't have done that. He might have fallen off, but he did it and he deflected it. God's hand was at work in that movie. Because all the best scenes were accidents.
Wow, insane. So yeah, if you want to get your fix of what this period really looked and felt like, go and watch Henry V, 1940. If you don't have Amazon Prime, I know it's on YouTube. If somebody hasn't upscaled it to 4K yet, then they need to get on that. Upscaling stuff's really good right now. So there we are. There's Agincourt. Essentially, the English know that they are seriously outgunned. I don't think they were outmanned, but they were much more outgunned. The French were bringing all of their knights on horses and dismounted, lots of infantry without much support. They were incredibly arrogant and thought, we're just going to go in there and smash them. This is just a raiding party. What could they possibly do against us? But the English used terrain completely to their advantage and set up like defensive fortifications in such a way to funnel and slow down any charges so that they could just get completely picked off with these longbowmen. It was
another important thing with the longbowmen, they had carts was full of arrows because the only one that battled was the Welsh and the Scots. Henry V's side ran out of arrows, and so the longbowmen were basically useless for the second half of the battle. And so he's like, "That's not going to happen again. Yeah. Get the carts, load them with arrows. We're not going to run out of ammo." Which was
just think of the industrial machine needed to do that.
Yeah,
like, when you think, this is just the Dark Ages, and no, not at all. So, that was Agincourt, and it's one of the most famous battles in all of history, frankly. So again, Go look it up properly. The next battle I've got on my list here is in 1424, and this is where I don't know how to pronounce any of these because I don't know a whole lot about the latter half of the 100 Years' War, at least nowhere near as much as the first half. But it's where things like every battle we've listed so far, there's been 4, and the English have just smashed the French. It was completely one-sided. If the French weren't anywhere near as powerful as they were in terms of land mass and economy, they would have just been wiped out a long time ago. It was only the fact that they were so huge and so powerful that they could have lasted for as long as they did. But just like almost the Soviets in the Second World War, if a country like that survives long enough, eventually it's going to turn back around on you once things actually start getting going. And this does start to happen from 1424 onwards, where the English win another battle at Verneuil, I think it is. So we win again. This is the 5th battle we've won in a row, essentially. But to a huge cost in lives. And like I've been insinuating, England does not have the advantage in terms of manpower. Everything we've had to win so far has been naval battles or incredible tactical master strokes, because we couldn't fight one-on-one with basically the most powerful country in the world. But when the tactics sort of deteriorate from this point on and things do become much more pitched battles, you could maybe argue as well that this is due to arrogance, due to the fact that the English were beating the French all the time. They could have been letting their standards slip and just thinking, well, why are we fighting the underdog fight? If we win all the time, then clearly we're not the underdog. We're the ones on top. We can just brute force smash it. And yeah, I think they didn't double down on their winnings, which was of great detriment to them. But it was at this time where a young girl, who I think she was a farmer's daughter, appears on the scene, starts claiming to have had prophetic visions and apparitions and visitations. I don't know the details of them. I can't remember exactly what she said she saw. I think it was something. What do you know?
I vaguely remember Belloc has a whole book on Joan of Arc, and it was really more of a history of the time period and her Roland. It's very good. But if I remember correctly, she saw St. Catherine it was not St. Catherine. Was it? It might have been St. Catherine, St. Mary Magdalene, and St. Michael were the 3 saints who appeared to her. And they told her job was going to be her. It was her appointing a crown to the French king.
Yeah.
Which is there's so many. We can do a whole. I mean, we're at 42 minutes. I might want to call it early actually before we get into the Joan of Arc stuff, because there's a lot with the Joan of Arc period I want to dive into.
Okay, good. And I'll research more about her anyway. Really interesting. But if I can just spoil it, if I can just spoil her story, she was killed by the English bishops essentially, because, like I said, towards the end of the war, the bishops stopped, having any sort of amenities towards each other, and they condemned her of heresy for all of this, and so she was killed for it. And now even the Anglican Church venerates her as a saint, which shows
I want to describe here in detail her last moments. So they brought her out to the pile, and the entire town is pretty much like, oh yeah, we're burning someone, let's go watch. So everyone kind of gathered around to watch like you would do. And then when they brought to go up there, everyone's like, oh, this is I can't remember what book it was that describes it in great detail, but they're like, burn the witch. And as they tie her to the pile, she asked if someone would raise a crucifix so she could see it. And they raised the priest in the back raises the crucifix into the air just so she can lay. So because he said, raise the crucifix so my last sight can be that of my Lord. And as the fire rises, she just keeps screaming the name of Jesus until she perishes. Incredible. And after she died, everyone was kind of like, did we just burn a saint? No one celebrated. No one thought it was a good idea. Everyone was like, oh, we just killed a holy woman. Shit.
Yeah.
No one. Yeah. Only the bishops really. And the bishops. I'm not going to get into that. They were bishops.
Yeah. And, like I've said, it goes to show that she's a saint in the Catholic Church. there's a town near me that's got in the Catholic Church. There's a chapel dedicated to her, and the Anglicans venerate her as well. So yeah, she was not a heretic, and everyone came to realize that, including the people that were responsible for her death.
Now, if only the people who claim her today would realize how great she was.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about mentioning that. Let's not. My head will explode.
Yeah, my sister came out today and she wanted to borrow one of my books on Joan of Arc, and I'm like, why? She goes, chaperone this episode. I'm like, I will kill someone.
Yeah,
chaperone is on my list. Her and Eric Weinstein.
Well, I mean, Joan of Arc herself was killed for less, so
That's misfitting.
Yeah. Okay,
No,
but there we are. That's 50 minutes nearabouts, isn't it, already? And we're halfway through the 100 Years' War, or near the end.
I mean, I knew this is going to be a giant, what's the one looking for? A giant event. So trying to record all of this stuff. It was going to be huge. But I am downloading each of them. So when it's done, they'll be uploaded like a 7 to maybe 8 hour long single stream on the Spotify.
Yeah. Crazy, isn't it?
That's going to be fun.
Looking forward to that.
Man, I love having you on for these.
Brilliant. So next time we'll go back to Joan of Arc, the end of the 100 Years' War, and then it'll be on to things like the Wars of the Roses, and then the Tudors entering the scene. So
the Tudors. The only thing I know about the Tudors is that there was a TV show with Henry Cavill, and he played one of them.
Yeah, I only watched a couple episodes. I thought it was shit.
Even with our great Henry Cavill.
I don't even remember him being in it, unless I'm thinking of a different series.
That's positive for him, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
but there we are.
We covered probably almost 100 years. Matt, where can people find you at?
Twitter, Chayada of Mercia, and on YouTube as well. I've just uploaded another video recently, which I said for a long time I was going to do, and it's been received really, really well. It's got way more views than any of my other videos ever get. So
nice.
That should motivate me to keep on pumping out some more over there too.
Fantastic. Well, so everyone, Matt, thanks for coming on. Look forward to doing this again. Everyone, thanks for listening. I don't know what I have planned next. Go back and re-listen to the Chester Belloc series. Connor and I need to be recording the next one, but he is busy getting married, like a gay guy. He's gonna have a wedding, all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. Everyone, thanks for listening. Have a good night and God bless.